When you're drinking a frozen beverage from McDonald's, your brain may not like how refreshingly cold it is. But the rest of your body? Oh, yes. It's gonna relish every moment of it. Because there are drinks. Then there are drinks from McDonald's.
Get all the chill you need for just $1.69. From any size frozen drink, like a frozen Fanta Blue Raspberry, to a new ice-cold lemonade. Prices and participation may vary. Cannot be combined with any other offer.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Game over, man. Game over. Johnny.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Why so serious?
Roll out.
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Women in Session podcast. I'm sure you're probably expecting to hear the dulcet tones of Kristen Battistella's voice. Unfortunately, our wonderful, sainted, incredible regular host is out this week for various reasons. Unfortunately, scheduling this time of year is quite difficult, but fear not, Amy Thomasson and I are here to present a relatively normal episode to you, and I'm Zita Short, for context. Forgot to introduce myself, but as you'll probably be aware if you've listened to previous episodes of this podcast, we attempt to cover cinema from a feminist perspective, and in particular, as employees at InSession Film, we like to have a good mix of the old and the new, because our fantastic editorial team, I'm talking about Dave, I'm talking about JD, they're really good at encouraging us to branch out and address some of these older films that might not have that big of a contemporary audience, but are still fascinating to discuss and break down and analyze. So in the past few weeks, I would say, in the Women in Session group chat, and even in previous episodes, one 80s movie has been a topic of discussion, and that is St. Elmo's Fire. Just a bizarre film, truly, or possibly the quintessential 80s movie. I think it would be difficult to find a film from that period that sort of typifies the politics and the American monoculture of that era better. It's just such a blast from the past. And so I wondered... I wondered, Amy, you were one of the people who sort of first brought this film up. You seem to have a long history with it. And so I just wondered, when did you first see it? And over the years, have you thought about it every few months? Or was it just in the past few weeks? St. Elmo's Fire, bit of a weird film.
I saw this movie years ago. It's not one that I remember the first time I saw it. It came out in 1985, so I was 6. So I didn't see it till I was older. And it had to have been college or as an adult. You would think, looking at the cast, because you, especially Judd Nelson, Emilio Estevez, Andrew McCarthy, and Andrew McCarthy, I said that right. 3 of the, and Ali Sheedy, that it would have been directed by John Hughes. And I have to remind myself every now and then that it's not one of the John Hughes movies. It is, of course, Joel Schumacher directed, also co-written by Joel Schumacher. Mm-hmm. So my feelings about this movie are so mixed. On one hand, there's something in it that I could watch this movie every single day, beginning to end, and never get bored of it. That being said, the more I watch it, the more questions I have. and I'm never satisfied with the answers that I get. And so it's a movie I really need to discuss with people. And again, this is not The Bicycle Thieves. It's not one of our Palme d'Or winners. It's not on Sight and Sound. It's just a crazy movie. And I think the more you watch it, the more insane the movie actually is. And the more problems you realize of things that don't make any sense.
Yes, and that's the thing. And I think it's very significant that you mentioned that this is not a John Hughes production. He was the king of teen movies in the 80s. In his way, one of the most influential directors of that period. And so many of those 80s teen movies that came along were knockoffs or attempts to recapture the magic of those films. And obviously, we look at those movies and yes, there are a couple of flaws, they're a bit dated, but I would say that you look at something like The Breakfast Club and there is a real artistic voice behind that film. There is a sense of someone really trying to impress their own views on class and gender relations into what could have just been a basic programmer. And those movies really spoke to teens in the 80s in a really deep and profound way. And I think much as we might not put those films on the level of Bicycle Thieves, I do think that in the critical community, there is a respect for The Breakfast Club or Ferris Bueller's Day Off that is not
16
excited.
Candles.
Yeah.
There are moments in that. Who hasn't been Molly Ringwald in that movie? Even if your parents don't forget your birthday, that feeling of being forgotten, of being a nobody, of being invisible at school.
Yeah.
And some of the stereotypes, and they really, that is a whole genre that they have never been able to get back. That look at teen life, because everything kind of started focusing on like hyper rich kids and things like that, which seem far less relatable. But these seemed like real kids. And played by young enough actors that they seemed very young. Because I think Molly Ringwald really was actually a teenager when she was making these movies. She wasn't like a 30-year-old trying to pass for younger.
Yes, I think that's an important point to make. And I also think that there's a sense that these movies were, in their way, sort of experimental. Something like Ferris Bueller's Day Off. That movie is unique in that the protagonist is kind of a smug little shit. He's the sort of figure who would typically be taught a lesson in that sort of movie. You would see, oh, he grows and he changes. Yes, he stays witty and charming, but he learns to be nicer at the end of the film and he apologizes to his parents. None of that happens, and it is interesting how it is just sort of this free-flowing narrative, and so much of the film is basically just a vibes movie or a hangout movie. A lot of it is just these three teens in Chicago running around having a great day. And I think that's not something that you get from Class or 3 O'Clock High or one of these sort of lesser attempts to capitalize on the teen market from that period. St. Elmo's Fire is a weird case in that it's better than Class, I would say. It doesn't have that sort of crappy secondhand feel. They did bring in the big guns for this movie. You have
all of them.
Yeah, all of the huge Brat Pack stars. This was clearly a high budget film. And I think maybe that's what makes it a so bad it's good movie, or an oh god this is awful but I just can't look away movie. It looks like a movie. You think, oh wow, these production values are impressive. I believe Joel Schumacher began his career as a costume designer for Woody Allen movies.
Wait a minute, hold on. Let me check his IMDb. That's crazy. I had no. Zita Shore, you always teach me. Raised in New York City by his mother, Schumacher graduated from the Parsons School of Design. He originally was a fashion designer. He first entered filmmaking as a production and costume designer while gaining writing credits for Car Wash, Sparkle, and The Wiz.
Oh, wow.
This is all on Wikipedia, folks. I'm just citing my sources.
Yeah.
Crazy. He became a designer for Revlon.
Oh, wow.
Really crazy. He did interiors for Woody Allen. He did Prisoner of Second Avenue, Sleeper.
Oh, wow.
Ladies and gentlemen, Zita Shore always teaches me things.
But
good for him.
Yeah, good for him. And I think that's the thing about him as a filmmaker. I would say he's not very highly respected. He has directed several films that have awful reputations, and yet there is a sense that he is elevated above your usual hack director in that, yes, he makes a lot of bad movies. He doesn't seem to be able to redeem a terrible script, and yet he does have this sort of stylistic flourish that I think draws you in a way that just an incompetently made bad movie can't. At least there's a sense with Joel Schumacher that he's almost there. He's kind of talented, and yet maybe he should have just stuck to being a costume designer / production designer, because as a director, what's going on? So this
movie really resonated with people. Like I'm on IMDb and people are like, "Oh my god, this movie." This is from IMDb. This is a masterful movie, masterfully crafted by a director and a cast of brilliant artists. A very underrated 80s comedy, great cast and some truly hysterical one-liners and quotes. A sharp, biting, funny film that often uncovers inner city struggle, including the aliens' brush with drugs. This movie was a sentimental favorite for me. When you learn graduating from college means entering the real world. I mean, people loved this movie, which we need to uncover this because, like I said, I actually could watch this movie. It's very watchable. Like, please watch it. Please watch it and please respond on Twitter. But I think we just need to start going through the storylines and figure out what WTF is going on in this movie.
Yes.
So they open the movie with, oh, we don't know how all 7 of us met. And that's another thing. It does give you a little bit of backstory, but I'm wondering how Jules and Wendy became friends. Like, no, Jules would clearly be in a sorority. Am I wrong?
And okay, this is one of the things that I love about the movie, is that clearly this is, let's say, a 12-year-old's idea of what it's like to be a postgraduate university student, because nothing makes sense. If you've been through university, sometimes you have friends where I guess you're technically friends, but it's sort of, we just have these mutual friends and sometimes we hang out. And do I really like her? Maybe not, but I can sit around.
But the part of the group.
With her. But the weird thing about this movie is that, no, it's not just that, oh yeah, some of these people, casual friends. No, we are meant to be emotionally invested in the bond.
We were always together. It was always all of us.
Yeah. Jules and Kirby, who barely interact in this movie, we are meant to believe that this man is devastated when he walks into Demi Moore's apartment and sees her trying to kill herself by just leaving the windows open while it's cold.
It's a little chilly. It's not even like snow. It's like it's a little cold.
Yeah.
So weird. But okay, so let's start with Emilio Estevez first. Okay. So at the beginning, the movie opens and they're all running, all of them are rushing to the hospital because they were in a car accident. And Demi Moore is there wearing like an evening gown and she's with a guy wearing a tux. What? And she's like, they're dead, aren't they? And in reality, both Billy, Rob Lowe, and Wendy, played by Mare Winningham, are like, she has like a slight scratch on her head. Yeah. Yet they're all running there, and her first reaction is they're dead, aren't they? Mm. And then Billy gets arrested, and they're all laughing about it. Like, that Billy, our little drunk alcoholic, drunk driving friend. And it's not until how far into the movie, a bit when they all go to the bar afterwards. So they're like, we're all okay. Everybody's fine. Let's bail Billy out of jail. Oh, Billy with his crazy antics. And so, okay. And she's okay, hold on. I gotta getting ahead of myself because I just rewatched it again like 2 days ago. So you find out when they're at the bar because it seems like Billy and Wendy are together in that opening scene, even though he was driving her car. Maybe they were out on a date or they were together. But that's the impression you get. Am I wrong? You get the impression that like they're a couple.
Important point. Never really clarified in this movie. I guess in sort of Twitter speak, you would call it a situationship. And yet it is more complicated somehow than most modern situationships. Even in the age of social media, this relationship is weird. Have they had sex? I guess she's...
Well, they haven't because he's obsessed with the fact that she's a virgin.
Yeah, she's a virgin. But you're just confused. You think, okay, have these people even... kissed? There's definitely chemistry. It's just very weird that they're having these play dates together all the time.
Yes. Why?
It's so strange.
Exactly. And so the implication is that they were out together, obviously. He was somehow driving her car for some reason, even though he was drunk. They get in the car accident. That's the opening of the movie, is the hospital. Okay. So you find out in the exposition that it's been 4 months since graduation. Okay. And he's treating every night like a frat party. So, okay, so the guys were all frat brothers. That's exposited. So then Billy's also hitting on the nurse in the ambulance and asks her about premarital sex. Because he plays the saxophone because it's the 80s. He plays the saxophone. So you're like, okay, so he was on a quote unquote date with Wendy and now he's like hitting on this person. Okay. So then they all go to the bar and someone's like, you should call your wife. And you're like, wait, what? He's married to some chick named Felicia. And you would think with how close all 7 of these people are, wouldn't the wife be part of the friend group?
Yes.
Because it doesn't seem like he ever spends time with anybody outside of that group of 7 people.
I think, okay, another thing that makes this movie perfect, so bad it's good material, is how messy this screenplay is. I think the thing that makes some of these other bad 80s teen movies just sort of boring is that there is something so formulaic about them. There's nothing weird that's sort of been shoved into the cracks. St. Elmo's Fire, every single scene, there's just something weird that stands out. For instance, there is an entire subplot that basically goes nowhere in this movie about how Demi Moore's wicked stepmother died, and now she has to arrange and pay for her funeral, and this could bankrupt Demi Moore. Never really comes to anything. Very odd.
Eventually, no, the woman's not dead. She's dying. Yeah. And for some reason she has to play, and it's the one that used to lock her in the closet when she cried,
Yeah.
according to Ali Sheedy.
Okay. Hearing this,
And at
you
the
would
end, he's
think,
like, I've been visiting her every day while she's unconscious, and we've had the best talks we've ever had. And you're just like, what?
see, this is what I'm talking about. A more talented screenwriter, someone with sound judgment, would think, 7 characters. We give each of them sort of one subplot that people can follow along with. This movie, no. Rob Lowe, he has a wife, a child. He's a part-time saxophone player. Also, he might be sleeping with this woman on the side, and she's a virgin, and he's obsessed with that. And there are times where they just flirt and nothing comes of
And
it.
he flirts with Demi Moore too. There's a scene where he almost comes extremely close to sexually assaulting her.
Yeah. Also, okay, another
Why are they friends with him? And he loses all of his jobs. His friends get him jobs, so and yet we're supposed to still root for him, and basically because he's played by Rob Lowe.
Yes.
So the first watch through, you kind of root for him, but after the 57th or 58th watch, which is where I am now, you're like, he's awful.
Yes. And okay, something I feel that we have to clarify talking about this movie, because it is so 80s. All of these kids, even the poor kids, have the attitude of rich kids. They are so privileged, so entitled. The opening scene, ha ha ha, there was a car accident, and Demi Moore thought that we were dead, but there was just a couple of scratches.
And
Let's go to this bar now and just hang
when
out.
Judd Nelson says to him, aren't you even worried about Wendy? And he's like, how bad is it? And he's like, it's awful. She almost hit the limit on her dad's charge card. And they do that, boogity, 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 They have that laugh that they do. And you're like, you were drunk driving and you could have killed somebody. And you totaled that person's car. And then you find out, back to Wendy and Rob Lowe, because this relationship makes me the most psychotic, that, okay, so they're on a date. So he's got a wife that none of them are friends with ever, because anytime they talk about it, they're like, his wife, like, she's such a rag. And you're like, she's home raising your baby while you're out playing with your friends. None of them are like, you know what, Billy, maybe you should get a job to support your kid. Like, none of them are like trying to get him to actually be a decent human. They're all just sort of like, oh, haha, he's got a kid. That's a whole serious element. And it makes no sense that she was never part of their group, because you would think that she would be, being as tight as they are, unless she was just some random girl that he had sex with. Like,
okay, I think that's the strong implication, is just that Rob Lowe took a girl home one night, she got pregnant. I have to admit, though, this character seems shitty enough that he would be the sort of person who would try to deny paternity and say,
yes, absolutely.
So it's sort of odd the way he's written, that he's kind of committed to being a dad. He went down the aisle with this woman, and yet,
and lives with her,
hanging out. It's very strange. And I think there's a way that you can write that where it makes sense. I think I have no idea what was going on in Joel Schumacher's head when he wrote this, but I think it's meant
there must be a lot of deleted scenes.
Yeah, I think it's meant to be sort of a source of poignancy, that he's sort of this man-child with, what do they call it, the Peter Pan complex. He can't stop. And then towards the end of the film, I think you're meant to believe that, this relationship with Wendy, the fact that they finally slept together, and I guess he came to appreciate how kind-hearted and warm she is.
She's a doormat.
She made him a better man, though, Amy. And now he's going to be a better dad. And no,
but he's not, though. But he signs over his rights.
Oh my God.
so the wife can marry someone else, and so he won't have any relationship with his kid, and he's moving up to New York
Oh
City.
my God. Oh my God.
What?
It's so weird. This
Does he love
movie.
her? I've never got the feeling that he loves her.
No.
I feel like he gets a kick out of the fact that she's a virgin and she was paying his rent.
Yes. Okay, another thing that makes this movie fun.
Because why would she invite just him over to dinner? That's very boyfriend girlfriend thing to do.
Just okay.
And then she says, I don't think we should see each other anymore. So it's sort of like she's breaking up with him, but they're not actually dating. I don't understand that.
But that, okay, another thing about the movie that I sort of like in a perverse way is that everyone is immoral. No one in this movie has the moral compass of a real person, let's be fair, or even just a character in a mainstream 80s blockbuster where, oh, the movie opens, the main character saves a cat, so we can prove that they're a nice, normal human being that you should root for. No one in this film has any values or principles. They're just willing to throw them away whenever they get an opportunity to make money or have a workplace affair. It's so strange. And I guess I feel like we should sort of break it down scene by scene. Might be too complicated. Let's say subplot by subplot. So we've kind of done Billy and Wendy already.
And we've come to no answers. We've come to no answers. Are they dating or not? I don't know.
I think the thing that I feel we haven't addressed, we'll move on after this to a different subplot.
We're done with you, Rob Lowe.
Yeah, with Rob Lowe, bye. But Wendy, her character is so underwritten. As you pointed out, she is just this doormat that Rob Lowe can step on. I think
she is a frumpy virgin.
Yeah. I think in most movies from this period, Rob Lowe is this matinee idol. He's definitely someone that young girls from this period would want to sleep with, I imagine.
Oh, he's beautiful. And he still is. Rob Lowe, call us.
And yet in this movie, his character is such a scumbag. And so I just sort of wondered, I don't think that this is aspirational for young girls. I don't think any young woman watches this and thinks, oh yeah, I want to be Wendy. Is it just sort of conservative 80s politics where you need to have a virgin or something because everyone else is sleeping together and there's
I think you do. And I think what her virginity is for is to show that she's the one that's different, quote unquote. Yeah. So he's used to girls like, and I also want to know if he and Demi Moore's character ever slept together, because I definitely, when they were in the car, there was a little, oh, you should know, like you get the feeling that they've definitely hooked up in the past. And why would she do that when she knows that Wendy is clearly in love with him? Like, I don't, yeah. If I knew that my friend was like really in love with one of our guy friends, I don't think I would hook up with him. That's just me, because I'm a nice person. But I think she is so different because she's dressed like a nun the entire movie. And he's so fascinated with her virginity, but it's all like, ooh, she's innocent. She's sweet. She's pure, unlike all these other whores.
I think the weird thing, though, is that we talk about how this friendship circle does not make sense. How on earth did she become a part of this group? Everyone else is sleeping together. I believe that every single other member of this friendship group, they had an orgy at some point in time, or they have all slept together. How did she get to know them? Why did they keep inviting her out if she's so tame and innocent? And I just don't believe her as someone who's a really close friend of all of these people.
It's extremely strange. I don't see why Rob Lowe would want to hang out with her that much. But again, that's such a suspension of disbelief. And there's a difference between having a cast of characters that are flawed but human. The problem with this movie is that it's very clear that we're supposed to look up to them and be like, oh, they're so cool. They're so cool. They're clearly the cool kids because they don't seem very nuanced. They seem strange. And like, we're supposed to look up to them because they're so good looking and cool, and they live in these big apartments and they were in fraternities and stuff like that. And I think that's my real problem with the movie. And and the other thing is that the style at the time that makes them seem younger is that they all look like they're wearing their mother's clothes. Ali Sheedy, her styling is rough.
And I
know
she is a beautiful woman.
She is.
Make her look bad somehow.
But they give her the worst haircut in the history. But the thing is, I know where I was born and raised, that is how women dressed, with the ties and the collars with the ruffles around the edges and the vest sweaters and the pearls and the sweaters that went down to the knees and the skirts that went down to the ankles. It's horrifically awful. And yet again, we're supposed to believe these men are, and again, because she is a beauty and she's smart and she's like the normal one. She's not the frumpy virgin and she's not the cokehead sleeping with her boss. But let's talk about Alec and Andrew McCarthy. So Andrew McCarthy, he's such a rag the entire movie. All he does from the opening scene until the end is whine and complain about how lonely he is and how he would be an incel today. He would be the one behind the things talking about how basically all women are either prudes or whores and women suck and love sucks, and because he feels entitled to easy access to women. And the scene that for 1,000 reasons is super, super cringe is when he takes Ali Sheedy, and we'll get back to why she's there later, when he brings Ali Sheedy back to his apartment and he has a coffin in his apartment, which, as a woman who was single for a while, if I ever went to a guy's apartment and he had a coffin, I would leave because that is psycho. And he has all those awards, and Ali Sheedy says to him, "Oh, did you win all these writing awards? I'm really impressed." And he said, "No. He just has these things to like have things to talk about with the women he brings back." And then he says he's never brought any women back to his apartment. What? And Ali Sheedy does not run away screaming.
However, okay, we talk about this movie sending out sort of bad messages. I think this is one of the few cases in which this movie kind of implants a good idea in the minds of young women, in that I think it's a fantasy for a lot of young girls that, oh, there's going to be this guy who's pining for me from afar.
Oh,
wouldn't it be romantic?
We all wanted that. We all wanted that.
If he confesses his love to me dramatically one day. In this movie, they make that look like the most unappealing prospect in the world. He is such a sad sack. He is boring. He's depressed, not clinically depressed, just one of those people who's just miserable all the time and miserable to be around. And he's so drippy about it. And also an Andrew McCarthy thing, his signature, I guess, is that he constantly looks like he's on the verge of bursting into tears. He just has these wet eyes.
So I know what you're talking about.
You cut to him in these scenes where he's saying, "I love you. I know you're involved with my best friend, and it could make things awkward, but I just wanted to get this off my chest.
And I haven't been able to write because I'm in love with you."
And he's writing articles about politics for the Washington
He's
Post.
no, he does the obituaries. He does the obituaries, which fits in with his character because he's so freaking miserable and such a drip. Again, how does he have any friends? He is awful and whiny and pathetic.
Okay,
and the coffin and the fake writing awards, that's like his whatever brings a woman back.
I so much
How has this person ever had sex? Is what I would like to know.
I sort of believed this dynamic though, because I think he's there so that the guys in the group look better. Because we meet Judd Nelson's character, Alec. He is irredeemably awful. Somehow, one of the worst human beings in this movie that is populated entirely by characters who would definitely become Trump supporters. No one in this film is at all redeemable on a moral level.
He would be one of the lawyers.
Yes, he
would be Andrew McCarthy, McCarthy in the
awful
Senate right now.
Yeah, so I think that Andrew McCarthy is there so they can go, oh, well, at least I'm better than him.
Because he's the quote unquote sensitive one.
No, but when they're in a club and walks up to a woman, tries to pick her up and fails, oh, well, at least I'm doing better than Andrew McCarthy. I think that's why he's there. And so I sort of got it. And even this strange love triangle, we need to get into it. So Ali Sheedy is stuck between two equally unappealing options here. She is already involved with Alec, who is the
former leader of the Democratic student group, except he basically sold his soul because now he's working for a Republican senator.
Ooh, yeah.
And all the guys were frat brothers. That's kind of how they throw all the men together, their relationships. And Ali Sheedy loved him because of his Alec Newberry, and his name is Alec Newberry. We need to point that out too. The most Republican name ever. And he wears the button-down dress shirts with suspenders, like when he's out and about with his friends.
He's Michael J. Fox in Family Ties, basically.
Without the charm.
Yeah.
With zero charm, because speaking of some of these movies, it's like they have these flawed characters in the 80s, but with Ferris Bueller definitely has some kind of narcissistic tendencies. Like you could study him. However, because he's played by Matthew Broderick, he has a warmth and a charm, and you can see why people fall for his charisma, because he's got charisma for days. Matthew Broderick, who, side note, was actually originally cast as Alex P. Keaton on Family Ties, and I can see it. It's one of the only actors I could see besides Michael J. Fox, and Michael J. Fox in that role is an icon. But when people said, oh, Matthew Broderick was up for that role too, or almost played the role, I can see it. Because Michael J. Fox, who played this Republican, very heartless sometimes, also had a lot of warmth and a lot of genuine love. So he had that going for him. Same thing with Ferris Bueller and Matthew Broderick. Judd Nelson does not have warmth or charisma in this movie, but they all worship him. He's their leader, and he's the responsible guy because he wears suspenders and has a steady job, and he loves Ali Sheedy and he wants to get married. Yet he's also totally sleeping around on her. And like openly telling his friends. And again, what kind of friends are these that they're not like, by the way, he's sleeping around on you? And why doesn't Andrew McCarthy ever say, like, dude, stop, like, you're a dirtbag, break up with her if she's not giving you what you want?
But again, I sort of believe this because they're both terrible guys. There's a weird bro code thing going on, even though Andrew McCarthy ostensibly loves Ali Sheedy and is so devoted to her. He's also desperate for Judd Nelson's approval, even though he's stealing
Yes.
his girlfriend. And so he would never go behind his back and say, hey, he went home with this woman last night and he's maybe sleeping with his secretary. Those are just things that he would never say out loud. And so, yeah, I kind of, again, believe that dynamic. It is truly bizarre that no one at the development level looked at this script and went, so who's the sympathetic character here? Who is the audience going to like? And again, that makes the movie interesting. Just the fact that in so many ways, it's so ordinary, it's such a studio product, and yet it's deformed and mangled in this weird way because it makes no attempt to be likable or relatable
at all. It's very strange, and that yet I really feel like we're supposed to be rooting for them, which is what's very difficult, because when it all comes to a head at that party that Kirby's throwing, which hang in there, folks, because we're going to talk about that too. And he announces to everybody without her consent, oh, we're getting married on June 1st of next year. And she's like, dude, we talked about this. Like, why did you just do that? And he's laughing about it, totally disregarding of her feelings. And then she's like, and then he's, she said, I have to have something for myself. And he totally disregards that. And it's like, can you for 1 minute not talk about your damn career? And she's like, okay, let's talk about your extracurricular love life. He goes in, he punches Andie McCarthy out, and starts yelling at him. And then she's like, no, he didn't tell me that you were cheating on me. I just thought it, and you basically just proved it. So his reaction isn't to get embarrassed, apologize, or leave. It's to yell at her and, I want you out of the apartment tonight. Why? Because you got caught cheating, and you're screaming at her in front of everyone and throwing her out of your apartment. The mental gymnastics that he feels in that moment, that he clearly feels like he has been wronged somehow, baffles me.
Yes.
Baffles me.
But again, the thing I love about it is that this whole subplot, which could be its own movie, in a way, this is maybe the only plot line that feels substantial enough to be a standalone film, has to get resolved in 5 minutes after everyone else has kind of gotten their happy ending. So we get this weirdly off-the-cuff ending where, oh, everything's fine, the guys have broken up, Leslie realizes she needs to be single for a while, which would be a fine ending, would be a great ending, I think, if they had laid any of the groundwork for this. I do not think
and
that
yet we're led to believe that they're all just going to still be friends.
Yeah, does not make
not
sense.
like, you know what, I'm going to move and I'm going to live on my own, and I need to not be around either one of you for a while. Instead, it's, we still love you. And she's like, I love you both. And they're like, well, I guess it's okay to be friends. And that's how they leave it. And you're like, on what planet is this even? What?
Yeah, I could not. The tone, especially in this subplot, just fluctuates wildly. Throughout, I guess we should point out, there's a sort of light comic tone. It's more light than it is comedic. I wouldn't say there are any jokes from this film that anyone remembers, but then it gets so melodramatic at points in a way that even The Breakfast Club, the most dramatic scene in that film, is nothing compared to this. It is volcanic in terms of how emotional it gets. And I have to imagine that this was part of its appeal. It's sort of counter-programming to something like 16 Candles, which does feel as though it's targeted at younger audiences, Maybe
Yes.
St. Elmo's Fire is for your 14-year-old daughter and 16
Or people
candles
who are
for...
in college. Yeah, because at least with the characters in The Breakfast Club and 16 Candles, they are actually supposed to be 15 years old. These are clearly supposed to be young grown-ups because they all look 40 because they're all dressed like it. And again, at the end, that it's like, well, let's just all be friends.
Yeah, it's
Like, let's just
very...
chalk it up to it is. And then you've got Emilio Estevez. Emilio Estevez, who I honestly think that throughout the entire movie, and I think Andie MacDowell is the only normal character in the movie. And first of all, she looks the best. She looks stunning. She is so beautiful. And so you can see why someone would be obsessed with her because she is actually that stunning. Ali Sheedy is beautiful, but the way they style her, she looks like a frump. Andie MacDowell legitimately is like jaw-droppingly beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And she's aged stunning. Even today, where she's rocking that long, beautiful gray, silver curls. You're still beautiful, Andie MacDowell. It seems like she barely remembers who he is. And that seems very realistic because he comes up to her at the hospital at the beginning. People who don't remember. And he's like, Dale Beaverman. And she's literally like, and you can tell she's at work, preoccupied and sort of trying to kind of remember who he is because they went out on one date 4 years ago. And he's like, it's Kirby Kager. And she's like, oh, hey, Kirby. Yeah. And he's like, yeah, I graduated and I always knew you would. But you know that it's just, she's clearly just saying it to be polite. Like she does not remember this guy at all. And he's just like, my entire life has changed. And she's like, back to work, which is very real. And this scene, really, his entire storyline is like, I cover my face with my blanket. I cover it and I'm cowering and my body is turning inside out, is when he stalks her in the rain. And he does stalk her. That's nothing to make light of. He legitimately stalks her. She goes to that party and she goes inside and he's followed her and he's on a bicycle, which is such a great way to show how pathetic he is. He's on a bike. Like he's not in a cab. He's not in a car like a grown up. Like he's on a bike like a teenager. And he's staring at the door. And the next thing you realize, he's going into the party and it's from his perspective. And you're like, wait a minute. Not only did he stalk her and she's at a very fancy party and he's drenched and she literally turns around and is like, oh, hey, Kirby. And he's like, I'm obsessed. Thank you very much. And so there's a little bit of anger in there that he's feeling towards her, which is very, very frightening.
Oh, God.
Do you know what scene I'm talking about,
I know,
right?
yes. Okay, throughout this subplot, what are we meant to think of him in particular? I was back.
Isn't he sweet for being so in love? We're not actually, there's no way we're actually supposed to be afraid of him like we would.
No, but okay, Amy, there are plenty of sort of teen movies and rom-coms where, oh, stalking is romantic or it's just sort of funny. This film, you get this straight up shot of, I think it's Andie MacDowell and her actual boyfriend hanging out in this cabin for their weekend away. And you see Emilio Estevez's beady little eyes and his nose peeking through the bottom of the window like the creepy, terrifying stalker.
Yes.
You cannot convince me that that shot is composed in a manner that is meant to make us think,
it's like a horror movie. And you see it in the fact that you see him, the camera is his point of view as he's walking into the party. He's like a freaking serial killer. And then what makes my brain synapses explode is that she then takes him back to her apartment. Where are the men at this party who are like, dude, who are you? You shouldn't be here. Go away, you creepy weirdo. He stole her work schedule? When he comes back and he's talking to Andrew McCarthy, he's like, love is stupid. Boo, wow. Love is dumb. And his whole theory on being afraid of Russia. And and then you get, oh, well, I've got her works. I called the hospital and got her work schedule. That is psychotic. Going to the party, psychotic. When she brings him home and he picks up her pillow and smells it, psycho, creepy. And then he throws that party for her, and the whole party, he's calling her place of work, screaming at people. He goes to her apartment. He threatens her roommate. I'm not going to be responsible for what happens to you if you don't tell me where she is. That is very, very frightening. And he drives up there. She has a boyfriend, and like he still doesn't leave. It's so creepy and wrong. And yet the story that we're left with is he kisses her while her boyfriend's in the house, and he leaves and the music is all triumphant. It's so twisted, and he's cheering and he feels like he did something really, really great. And the music's all light and triumphant. And in reality, that is very, very psychotic behavior. Very psychotic behavior.
It is, yes. And throughout, you're thinking, oh, even in this movie where all of the other subplots are twisted in their own way, you think, this is a bit funny. This does not feel as though it fits in with the tone of the rest of the film. And yeah, I was really struck by that this time around. And even just the casting in this movie, I think we should address. So Judd Nelson, sort of cast against type as this successful yuppie. I'd say he's most famous as this kind of countercultural figure in the Breakfast Club.
The fist in the air at the end of at breakfast at Tiffany's. Excuse me, the Breakfast Club.
Yeah.
And he rocked that part. And that character was sketchy too, but more so in this where he's supposed to be a good guy, quote unquote good guy.
Yeah. I guess, okay, Rob Lowe, I would say sort of typecast. I feel as though his whole 80s thing was kind of, I'm just a really
He's a bad boy.
Not even bad boy. I'm a, sorry to use this term, but fuck boy. Basically, he sleeps around, he's irresponsible, but he's fun. He's not the sharpest tool in the shed, but you can get along with him. Then Andrew McCarthy, I guess again, sort of cast to type because he frequently played sad sax as Blaine in Pretty in Pink. There is no...
The lame guy. He's the lame one. He's rich, but he's lame. Ducky had all the fire in that movie. Hashtag justice for Ducky.
Yeah, but sorry, in terms of casting against type, Emilio Estevez, kind of seen as the face of the Brat Pack for a lot of people, I would say, is one of those weird figures in that he was a father of two, I think, during the period in which he was making all of these movies. So he's...
Really?
Yeah, he's an adult, straight up, when he's doing all of this. And I have always felt that he sort of has this air of maturity, and that works for a lot of his roles. This character, though, I have to wonder why he's sort of aiming to be this big movie star at the time. When you get this script, none of the male roles are amazing. You're not playing King Lear, but I would say this is probably the least appealing part. If you're a man, you think, oh God, young girls are walking out of the theatre thinking that I'm a creepy stalker.
But I don't think that's what they were thinking, because with the triumph at the end, I think the final image of Andie MacDowell is supposed to be like, oh, maybe I should give him a chance, or almost like she respects him a little bit. which is weird and wrong and a bad message to send. But he leaves and he is triumphant. The music goes dun dun dun, and he's woo, and he's hitting the top of the car. And so he leaves he cock walks out of there after he kisses her. He's like, later, dude. And it's this moment of triumph. And I think you're supposed to be like, oh, like good for him. Like that's a win for him. And I think when you're younger, you kind of feel that way. But watching it as an old lady, I'm like, dude, no.
Well, you are not
Andie MacDowell run. But her character was realistic, very like, hey, Kirby. She was always a little nervous. Oh, and when he makes the comment about Annie Hall, oh, I thought we saw a Mel Brooks movie. Oh, gotta run. Oh, I'm having a party. Sure, yeah, I'll see what I can do. Like that's how she acts, and that's very normal.
Yes,
and she's so and she really is. She is the true beauty of the movie.
Yes.
And her name is Dale Beaverman, which I kind of have some problems with. But okay, we'll give you that one, Joel.
Weird choices being made, but I would say that this Emilio Estevez subplot feels very disconnected from the rest of the film, insofar as none of these subplots are sort of expertly connected. This is not one of those movies that you watch and think, wow, the construction here, this Joel Schumacher, he's the Billy Wilder of his generation. He knows how to construct this perfectly. It's very haphazard and bizarre and difficult to follow at points. The only plot line that felt, to me, even more sort of extant from the rest of the plot was Demi, because
yes,
with her, I think the problem is we don't really see the work lives of the other characters. It's mostly them during the hours when they're on breaks or after work, hanging out together. And it's this reprieve from the horrors of adult life, which, yes, working all the time, not fun. Working to pay off your student loans, even worse, because, oh God, I don't even have any disposable cash at the end of this. Anyway, sorry for that brief rant. But
oh no, I'm as someone who's in student loan purgatory for the rest of her life, I know exactly what you're talking about.
But yeah, Demi Moore, so much of her plot line is about what she gets up to at work. She's meant to be this hard partying yuppie who sleeps with the boss in order to get ahead. Her more conservative, modest friends warn her, oh, well, if this goes south, it could have terrible repercussions for your career. She sort of laughs it off. Of course,
and she's also a coke addict.
She's a coke addict. Very 80s. I think all of them should have been dealing with, I think, varying degrees of coke addiction. Let's say Andrew McCarthy.
Judd Nelson definitely should be addicted to cocaine in that movie.
Yeah, Judd Nelson, he is burying himself in mountains of cocaine every day. Ellie Sheedy every once in a while, but it's getting worse as she gets older. I think, yeah, it should be a problem for everyone across the board. But Demi Moore, she's kind of singled out as the problem child in this group and the one that we should be worried about the whole time. We've discussed her harebrained suicide scheme that doesn't end up working out, that brings everyone.
You'd have to be a cokehead to think that would actually kill you.
Yes. It's there's just so much happening with her, and I guess I was fascinated in a way that they tried to shove so many different character traits into this very small role in the film. It doesn't really work, but again, I appreciated the fact that they took things too far.
It's a lot. It's her character is a lot because she's got the deal with her stepmother who's dying. She has no relation. She has daddy issues. She has a drug problem. She sleeps around. She almost sleeps. She almost gets assaulted by Rob Lowe, and yet they all forgive each other at the end. And I guess that's supposed to be like, oh, we're still buddies, even though he did try to assault her. That's a very disturbing scene. More than just he's being a jerk. He hides her keys. He keeps trying to grab her, and she keeps saying no. And he basically calls her a slut. Like it's a whole problem.
It's not good. And I kept being reminded whenever they were on screen together of About Last Night, which doesn't quite feel like a Brat Pack movie in the same way, even though they were both big Brat Pack stars, and I assume a lot of young people saw the film. It does just feel a little more grounded in reality and a bit more adult, to a point where I think if you're 13 at a sleepover, maybe you don't want to watch it. But that film has, it focuses on a similar milieu, I guess you could say, and they're actually in a relationship in that one, but there's just a weird amount of crossover in terms of the character biography for Jules from this film and the character that Demi Moore plays in About Last Night. Both of them have disastrous relationships with their bosses. Both of them are entangled in all sorts of one-night stands. It's just interesting to consider.
Isn't that one based on an actual, like a David Mamet play?
Yes.
And
well,
so it's
very, very loosely. I believe it's one of those situations where they essentially,
because it's based on sexual perversities in Chicago, I believe is the title of the David Mamet play.
Yes, but I believe he claims at least that the screenplay for the film has
totally different,
a very, very loose relation to the play. And it's essentially just they wanted to make a movie about young, sexy people in Chicago and used his vague plot outline.
But yeah, Demi Moore, thank God she really grew up, and out of all of them, has had the most successful career and a lot more longevity. And I mean, she's really changed, and she's one that looked better as she got older.
Yeah,
her body completely changed. Like, she was a hard body. She was very soft in the 80s, and I'm not knocking her because she's a beautiful woman. But as she began to look more like herself, like in Ghost, where she's got that little short haircut in the 90s, and that's an icon. I mean, that movie was nominated for Best Picture. She was in A Few Good Men. I mean, she's had really good roles that do not just rely on her beauty. And she is a beauty to this day. But that character is just all over the place. And they have to make her the sacrificial lamb at the end of the movie. She's the one that wants to kill herself. And you're like, what? And yet her character also is lying about a lot of things. And like, she's having an affair. And part of me is like, is she even telling the truth about that? I always feel like she was lying about that. Like, it's so... Because then she gets fired, but she's pretending to go to work every day. Like, what happened? There could have been a movie just about her. What they should have done is made this into like a sitcom and made it like would have been like Friends of the 80s.
Yes. I think that's kind of the thing with a lot of these movies. The Big Chill, any movie that focuses on sort of a friendship dynamic, the general argument is, oh, well, it's better for television because it's long form and you have more time to explore these individual characters instead of having to chop up. At the same time, I feel as though this movie is more fun just because it tries to cram so much into such a brief running time. And as we've pointed out, it does not work. You cannot have one scene in which Demi Moore tries to kill herself in a ridiculous manner, reveals that she's a pathological liar, and then this immediately leads to 4 or 5 of her friends opening up and solving all of their emotional problems suddenly. That happens in 10 minutes, I would say.
And the guy, exactly. And the guy that saves her that's how he redeems himself. Rob Lowe redeems his character by quote unquote by telling her just telling her, hey, none of this is real. None of this is real. It's all imaginary. It's like, wait, what? Hold on a minute. Like, it is real. It's not imagined. She did sleep with her boss. It's a weird message to give at the end of the film. All of this drama you've created isn't real. No, it is real. She really doesn't have any money, and she really did sleep with her boss, and she really doesn't have a job. But Rob Lowe just shakes her out of it by telling her it's all self-created drama. And then he sleeps with Wendy. I do like Wendy's final scene, though, where she's wearing her hair. She doesn't have the headband in, and she's wearing the loose shirt, and she's talking about having her own apartment. That was a very real moment. I think that's probably the best piece of acting in the entire film. Because she finally seems very soft. She seems herself and very making her own peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and how it was the best peanut butter and jelly sandwich she ever had, that felt real. And it was I think it's the best acted moment in the movie, because it did actually seem like I get that excitement of being on your own for the first time and being soft and not looking like a little girl anymore. I thought that part was well done. I will give Joel Schumacher and Mare Winningham that.
Yes, and it is an odd conclusion. In some ways, I kind of agree with its intended message, in that I think most people looking back on their late teens and early 20s remember a moment where, say, they were really stressed out and they thought, oh, if I don't achieve this goal, if I mess this thing up, it is the end of the world and everything is over for me. And it turned out to not be that dramatic. Oh, you got a C+ on that chemistry paper in your first year of university, and it was fine. And no one has ever asked you about it, ever. And it's had no impact on your career. And then at the same time, I think it kind of does matter. Sure, you can get an average grade in one paper. If you just slack off throughout university, sometimes it does have long-term consequences. And there are only so many times that you can kind of hit the rewind button and say, okay, I'm resetting everything and I'm going to be better at this in future. Sometimes you do mess up your life. And Rob Lowe, or his character, I feel, has messed up his life and is a deadbeat dad and is going to be deeply regretful in 15 years' time when he has a near adult child who now despises him and will not talk to him and resents him. And yeah, I think he's messed up his life, basically.
No, and that's the sequel I want to see. I want to see Grota, where it starts off with 18-year-old Melody in a therapist's office at college being like, so my father was a deadbeat loser. Here's the other thing, is that I don't know how much you know about Georgetown University, which is where they were all supposed to go. Georgetown University is not an easy school to get into.
Yes, I have a distant relative who went there.
Okay.
She had to work her butt off.
Yes, it is a very competitive, and there was a girl in our town, and I grew up in a small town, okay? This girl was like the queen of our town. Brilliant, like had an older brother who went to MIT, one of the best schools in the world. She got into Wellesley, which is where like Hillary Clinton went. Okay. Wellesley is a small, private, very difficult to get into school. She got into Wellesley and did not get into Georgetown. Okay. That is how competitive. She was like golden girl, got into Wellesley, very hard, very prominent, one of the best schools in the country. Didn't get into Georgetown. And I'm supposed to believe that Billy Hicks got into Georgetown and graduated. What?
Okay.
At least in, I don't, kind of switching gears, just thinking about it for a minute though. The movie Reality Bites? a 90s
Yes.
film.
Oh, we should talk
Very
about that
similar.
one too.
Very similar. Recent graduates. That movie was way more accurate because they did seem like they were just a bunch of clueless kids who didn't know what they were doing. And they actually had real struggles. The girl working at the Gap after graduating college, the one who had the internship and having to do. And the difference, though, is that slacker friend, played beautifully by Ethan Hawke, he didn't actually graduate college. He was like a couple credits short, but he was a lazy bum and just didn't graduate. And that would have made more sense for Billy. But it's like Billy seems dumb. He doesn't just seem like a party animal. He actually seems dumb.
Yeah.
And not particularly bright. So how did this guy get into Georgetown, let alone graduate? That if he was their slacker friend who dropped out or flunked out, but like they were all still friends with him, that would have made a lot more sense.
Yeah, I just think my thing with a lot of these characters, even if it wasn't necessarily specified, I just assume that he comes from some incredibly wealthy family. It's a Jared Kushner situation. Back in the 80s, he was one of those original kids where his parents hired someone to Photoshop his head onto a volleyball.
Yes.
Then he got in on a volleyball scholarship, even though he's never played the sport in his life. And then some just coasted through.
Jared Kushner's from New Jersey. I know where he went to school, and I know that he had like C's, and there's no way he was getting in. They had to donate a lot. But his dad dad who went to prison for corruption.
Yeah.
And Chris Christie was the prosecutor that put him away. Even a broken clock twice a day, etc. But if his family came from money, they clearly cut him off at some point. But they never talk about that. Like, it's
okay. There's also a part of me that thinks, is he even cut off, or is he just no? There are so many hipster kids who want to live as starving artists just for kind of the aesthetic. So they know at the end of the day that, yeah, I have hundreds of thousands of dollars in the bank account and I could rent a nicer apartment. But at this point in time, I kind of want to see what it's like to be a poor person. And I'm going to slum it.
I see that. I see that.
As cultural tourism, which is a really gross concept. I think he's one of those hipsters. He would be living in Williamsburg if he had been
absolutely working at a coffee shop and playing his sax and
driving
trying to get
a bike. Just
yes, that would be him. And then he becomes Chris Traeger in the show Parks and Rec. He becomes a vegan and becomes like awesome. But it's just and I know people's reactions are like, why do you put this much thought into it? This is why I am who I am, is because I watch it, and these are the questions that burn in my mind.
And I also
about
think,
this movie.
Amy, you've set up a perfect upcoming episode in the form of Reality Bites, which is kind of St. Elmo's Fire for the 90s, even though I assume the makers of that film would not like to have their movie compared.
That would have been they would be, because there's 7 people, that would have been in the 90s. They could have done a fake The Real World put all of them in a house. This is what happens when people start being real.
Oh my gosh, The Real
That
World.
would have been the best. This is now going to be my project. HBO, call me. I've got an idea. I could pitch it.
But St. Elmo's Fire, very strange film. A lot to talk about. I guess I would recommend that you should watch at least once in your life. Sit down and watch St. Elmo's Fire. It is
you should absolutely.
Yes.
It is. It's wildly entertaining.
If you
It is
honestly,
wildly entertaining.
if I were a history teacher and I were doing a module on kind of American culture in the 80s, Reagan era politics, I would put on this movie for the class. And I think you can make a defense of it. It's not esoteric. The connection is not limited. No, this movie is the perfect product of that period.
Oh, absolutely. And it's entertaining. I will probably watch. I have the day without my kids today. As I clean and do things, I will definitely put that movie back on again and have it on because it's good for that. It is very good. It scratches that itch. The music in it is good. It's just I love it. I will say this. I love this movie. It is a terrible movie, and I also love it.
Yes. Yes, I am on the same page. I will definitely watch it at some point again, perhaps multiple times this year. You cannot stop me. If I am in a bad mood, if I have 2 hours to spare, I'm watching St. Elmo's Fire. It's the first movie I'm reaching for, and that's not a great choice, but gosh, I can't help it. I can't help it.
Exactly. I'm drawn to it the way Kirby Kager is drawn to Dr. Dale Beaverman, the way Jules is attracted to cocaine and her boss, the way that Wendy is drawn to Billy. I am drawn to St. Elmo's Fire.
Oh,
God bless.
yes. Yes. And before we go, I just wondered, on the InSession website, what are you currently working on? And obviously, where can people follow you on Twitter?
People can follow me at Thomasson11 on Twitter, and I'm currently working on, heavily inspired by this film, some characters in films that we are supposed to love but are actually terrible.
Oh.
I have it narrowed down. I could have just done the entire cast of this movie, but I'm trying to pick just like maybe 2, but I have my brainstorm of other characters that are supposed to be cute or charming and endearing and are actually awful, and in some cases actually almost ruin the movie.
Does Kathy from Wuthering Heights make an appearance?
She's on my literary list.
Okay.
If I was gonna write a doctoral thesis, it would be why the cast of Wuthering Heights, from Kathy, Heathcliff, all of them, and all of their kids, all of them are terrible.
I think my thing though with the book though is that I think that that's deliberate. There's sort of intentionality there, and I think
I hope so.
You're meant to think that they're awful. In the movie, you don't see the kids at all, and 2, Kathy's just sort of pretty, and her awfulness isn't rooted in classism, or it is, but they never explore that. It's just sort of, for some reason, she just keeps making these bad decisions. And you think, we're kind of missing the point here. Kate Bush understood, at least. So.
It's not a romance.
Yeah, it's not.
They're awful. They are awful. And when Kathy dies, I'm like, yes, die, girl, die. But I think 2 of the characters I'm going to be discussing are children in films, so I feel kind of bad about that. But these kids are like, it's brutal.
Well, people, I hope, don't come after you over that. And I'm on the rapidly deteriorating social media platform Twitter, which might be dead by next week. Who knows?
Who knows?
I hate you, Elon. I really do. But I'm at Zita_short if you want to see the kind of burning embers of my account as it slowly deteriorates. And at the same time, I'm working on a couple of documentary reviews for InSession Film, so that's been great fun. And I think this podcast episode has inspired me to do a sort of favourite films of the 80s list, which might be too broad as a topic, so I'll have to workshop it with our editors. But thank you very much for recording this episode, Amy. You came in with the passion, the fire, the insight on a film that I think a lot of people would have just dismissed out of hand.
Of course, we're giving it the respect it deserves.
Yes, you brought a sharp, critical eye, and I appreciate it.
I brought the fire to say Elmo's fire.
Yeah.
Sorry, folks, we're recording very early in the morning here.
The heat this summer is at St. Elmo's fire. The passion burns deep. What? Okay, imagine you're looking at this poster. What does this mean? You don't know that St. Elmo's fire is a bar in this movie. They were so confident that they just went with that tagline, and I have to respect it.
I have to. Oh, it's brilliant. And I'm kind of sad. What, 1985 in the summer, they get St. Elmo's fire, and we're stuck with what, Oppenheimer and Barbie? What's up with that? I'm kidding. I'm dying to see those movies, but oh, good Lord.
Oh my gosh, bad movies used to be better.
They really did. They really, really did. But this has been a pleasure. Kristen, we miss you. We love you. We can't wait to work with you soon.
Yes.
Zita, always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure having you on, Amy. And I'm so glad that we finally got to chat about this movie in depth after so many weeks of occasionally touching.
Snarking about it.
Basically. So, yeah, thank you very much. And to the listeners as well, thank you for listening. We really do appreciate your support, and we love hearing your feedback, and we hope that you'll continue listening in future.
You like things just so. So do we. The Bank of Clark is the bank for that. We all have an inner perfectionist who deserves things done their way. Maybe you like to bank in person. Maybe you prefer to bank online. We get it. From banking to lending to wealth management, we're all about getting things done just the way you like them. We're the bank for that. Find out what banking designed for you is all about. Visit your local Bank of Clark branch today or go to bankofclark.bank. We're the bank for that. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.